section 36512E, the council shall within 60 days from the commencement of the vacancy either fill the vacancy by appointment or call a special election to be held on the next regularly established election date not less than 114 days from the call of the special election. You have two options. Option one is to appoint. It will allow the council to advertise and fill the vacancy within the next 30 to 60 days, depending upon how long we allow for advertisement. Because the vacancy occurred in the first half of Ms. Burke's term of office and more than 130 days prior to the next general municipal election, the resident appointed to fill the vacancy would only hold the office until the next general municipal election, and therefore until the person who is elected to fill the vacancy has been qualified. The person elected to fill the vacancy shall hold the office for the remainder of the term. Option two would be a special election, which would force the council to leave the position vacant until the next regularly scheduled election in November of 2015. For fiscal impact, an appointment will incur advertising fees at approximately $175 per week and attached to news. Both options would incur any additional costs to the election of city treasurer to the November 2018 ballot. Our recommendation is to appoint a city treasurer to fulfill the term until the upcoming general municipal election, which is in November of 2018, and direct staff to advertise, and include the office of city treasurer on the November 2018 ballot to fulfill the term until its expiration of November 2020.
Okay. Any questions from the audience? Council?
Do we have any candidates, Mayor?
Not at the present time. It hasn't been advertised.
At this point, you have the option to advertise to get candidates. We don't have candidates.
So,
Mr. Mayor, I've got a couple of questions. Just to clarify the position of treasurer, so the folks in the community understand what that position entails, could you basically describe what the functions of that position entail, Tori or Greg? I mean, I know we have ordinance that describes that, and there's a job description, but I think it's important that we understand exactly what that is.
Sure. So it's an elected position, first off, just like the council and city clerk. It is to attend the meetings and create the bank, am I correct, the bank statement that we have? And
It's
sign checks, one of the check signers. That's about it. Several years ago, we brought in-house the investment policy because we know that investing money is can be very complicated, especially in municipal government. And so we do that at City Hall. Hannah and I actually create the investment policy. We bring it to the City Council for your approval, and then our funds are invested every year. So attend the meetings, a check signer, and the bank statement.
Okay, great. Is the treasurer responsible for actually doing the analysis on the register or on the check, or is it just purely a procedural thing for the second signature?
It's a procedural thing.
Okay. And do we have qualifications that we publish? I assume that if we've got that out there, we could, if we do decide to advertise this, we could put the requirements or the qualifications in the newspaper also.
The only requirements are you're a city resident and you're registered to vote. That's it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
any other questions?
I do. If we're gonna have an elected officials, I'd like to see him sitting up at the dais, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, she did sit over there, didn't she? Our other treasurer.
Not for a long time.
Okay, any other questions? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Well, we have two options, and one is a recommended option, and that is to advertise, and then in 4 weeks, 6 weeks, we have a 30 to 60 day window, so we need to, establish the time period that you'd like to advertise with our planning commissioners and our PBRPD appointment, we typically advertise for 30 days. Local newspaper and all of our different websites and social media. So we can do that. After 30 days, if we find that we have qualified applicants, we'll bring it back to the city council for your review. And then if you have more than one choice, you would have to select somebody, take a vote, and then that person would fill the term until November 2018. 2018 is the next general election. So if anybody is interested in running for city treasurer, they would have to get themselves on the ballot, just like any elected official would. So the general election, the general election in 1 year. So this person would be filling the term for 1 year and then be on the ballot if they wish to put the name on the ballot, or anybody else. It's a competitive process. So we recommend that you take, is it option 2, Tori? Option 1, thank you. Option 1.
Okay. So is your motion still for option 1?
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
I have a motion and a second on the item as discussed for option number 1. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Motion carries. Let the record show that it was a 5-0. Our next order of business is item number 5. I'm going to have to open the hearing. Notice of public hearing and correspondence. Is there any correspondence?
There was no correspondence received.
Okay, staff report.
Honorable Mayor, council members, I'm going to give Tom a run for his money tonight. Got a few items for you. The first is an amendment to our zoning code. As you all know, we adopted a pretty comprehensive change to our zoning code in October 2014. It's a hybrid of form-based and conventional zoning, which anyway makes it fairly complicated. And with any kind of new set of codes like that, as projects come in to our department and get kind of run through the code, so to speak, we discover the areas in which we have something as little as a typo to something as significant as a procedural issue that just doesn't flow very well. So we've already once amended the zoning code to address some of the issues that staff has identified. That's before you tonight is a second amendment to the zoning code. And I provided in my staff report to you all a summary of those updates. I mean, if you wish to read or discuss any of the items in the actual resolution, we can, which is the individual changes to the code. But let me briefly run you through the updates, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys have. Just as a reminder, this did already go to the City Planning Commission on October 9th. They did do a detailed review, as is their duty, and discussion, and they approved and recommended that the City Council do the same for this purpose. Anyway, so the first item for you, some non-land use activities were listed in some of the tables in Article 3. These are things like a temporary use was listed as a land use on the land use tables, and it created a little confusion and also consumed some valuable space in the tables as they're presented in the zoning code, which does matter so that we can have good, clean tables that present information in a way that the public and developers can understand. So we're just eliminating those out of those tables. It has no change on the way we procedurally handle temporary use or what is defined under the zoning code as a household pet versus what isn't. It's just removing them from Article 3 section, so it doesn't have a meaningful change to that operation. The second item is multiple terms are used throughout the land use tables for the same type of item, also known by us as an accessory dwelling unit. So there's about 4 or 5 different names in the code for an accessory dwelling unit, which is typically like a granny flat or a secondary dwelling on a single family residence. So it is permitted in many zones in the city to have like a little house, a single family studio apartment in the back where you maybe a mother-in-law quarters or something are. They're named differently, it creates some confusion, so we unify that term to accessory dwelling unit. And then in Chapter 11 under definitions, we kind of combine all those together so the definition is very clear. The third item is agriculture. This is a simple typo item. Agriculture is under the industrial category in the T4.5 zone. Twice it's on the table in 2 different places, so we're just removing that redundancy. Land uses for medical services and business professionals. So this is the RP zone. We have a small zone that only affects a handful of properties in town. It's called residential professional. It's a common zone in the world of zoning and planning. And that is where you have, and you've seen them commonly in towns, where you might have a single-family house right next to a dentist's office that has reoccupied an old single-family house. So residential professional. And that's a specific zone where you can bridge between those two. Anyway, we have a medical services, and we have an RP zone, a residential professional zone, and some items were missing off that table. Noticeably, medical services and business professionals were accidentally left off that table, making it functionally a residential zone. We think this is clearly a typo. The old zone for RP had these items, so we believe we're simply correcting the typo by adding these back to this zone. Additions are added to Article 420 to clarify minor setback approval. This is probably the only significant change, in my opinion, to the code. And what this does is it gives me, as the Director of Development Services, the authority to approve minor setbacks without bringing those items to the Planning Commission. Example, and we do define exactly what a minor setback is. It's not just amorphous and up to me, it's up to 10 feet. The issue being that in some housing tracts, you know, or you bring a new home into housing tract, we have very specific setbacks, 25 feet from the street to the front of the house, and 5 feet on one side, 10 feet on the other side. Well, a good example is here in the downtown. We have a lot of homes that violate today's current standards for side setback. Our current standards are 5 feet on one side, 10 feet on another, distance between you and your property and your house. Well, a lot of the older homes have 5 feet and 5 feet. Well, as it currently stands, if you come in and you want a permit to build a garage on the back of your house, you've got to go to the Planning Commission, pay a variance fee to get approval to stay at 5 feet to 5 feet. And we don't think that makes any sense. It's both expensive and very time-consuming and unnecessary for folks. And so and this is what we presented to the Planning Commission, that minor setbacks like this should be approved at the staff level and not primarily to save money for the applicant. The next item is sections in Article 6 are reorganized. Article 6 is items special and specific to the zones. Big boxes get treated as special. We have some special rules. Commercial gas stations like the Pilot Travel Center have some special rules, etc. So we simply reorganized that. We didn't feel like it read very well, and it was difficult to find things. So again, we didn't make any changes to the operation. We just reorganized the data. Some minor corrections and additions are made to the tables in 910, and the table in 910 is just the various permits and what the steps are, who approves what, who appeals to that. It's just these tables that clarify for people procedural issues. So again, we just made some minor changes to clarify, no changes to the code or operation there. And then lastly, Article 11 is the definitions under the zoning code. We had a number of changes we thought were meaningful to clarify some definition issues, and so we made those changes. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any specific questions you guys may have, but again, I would remind you the Planning Commission unanimously approved this and recommends that you guys do as well.
Okay. Is there any questions that anybody in the audience has? Seeing none, council?
Yeah, I do. In section 6, there was a provision for signage in your front yard if you were a leasee.
All right, let's find it.
Okay. I think it was item B. I had it all written down. I forgot to bring the police vehicle.
Okay. Well, I'm looking at the resolution itself. Do you happen to know the page number on the resolution for the
No,
general
I
section 6?
did not, but
That's the start of it, but what was the question?
6B is daycare.
yeah.
Yeah, well, what's your concern?
Well,
Maybe I can
basically,
answer
it
that.
was a sign in your front yard, and it seems to me that if you have a lease on your house, you know, it's your house until the lease is up.
Okay.
And so the city has no right to stick their nose in there and tell you what sign you can put on there and what sign you can't. Or any at all. And
Okay.
that just seemed a little intrusive to me.
Is it specific to a certain type of business that might occur on that property?
It was basically anything but a for sale sign, is the way I read it.
Yeah. Well, we do have general codes about signs in town. Those are pretty wide ranging. That, for instance, political signs are legal, obviously, and then certain sized signs associated with selling or renting your property. I mean, the problem is always the outliers. It's never the average person, but you get some guy who will literally put up a 4x8 sheet of plywood to advertise renting
Well,
his house.
Yeah, I understand that,
So-
but, you know, 2x4 or 18 by 24 signs in your front yard, especially if they're for basically, public awareness or whatnot. I can't see taking those down. I can't see us getting on those and that.
Okay.
It really,
Well, I'm not
It is
suggesting any
intrusive.
changes to section 6, so maybe that's, if we've got an individual item that's currently in section 6 that's an issue, have you had a complaint, maybe the way I should ask the question?
no, not at all. I was just going through that, and I was writing them down as I went
Sure.
through this and forgot, my bad.
I understand. Well, maybe I'd invite you to send me an email or drop by if you know the section we can talk about. Again, we just reorganized chapter 6 to make it more readable. We didn't go through and change, there wasn't a rule before that we changed to a new rule now under chapter 6. So if there's a rule or an item in that code that you don't agree with, then maybe let me know what it is, and then we can determine whether we ought to bring that back to you.
All right, thanks.
Fair enough? Okay.
Let me go ahead and close the public hearing at this time.
I have a
Continue our
comment.
discussion with the,
Why do we have it as a resolution? If it's an ordinance, you got it on the agenda as an ordinance, and that would be appropriate.
Okay.
You're changing an ordinance, and you do that with an ordinance. If that's what you intend, then
That's
would
what
just-
I intended. Do we need to modify something then?
No, I think all we do is just, when you introduce it as an ordinance and clarify that the language on the document itself is intended to mean ordinance.
Yeah, understood. That is the intent, and this is just the first reading, so this doesn't take effect until, you guys don't vote on this issue until the second reading, which will be
Right.
next. Yeah.
is it,
Well, you vote to introduce it.
do what now?
You vote to introduce it. You
Right,
vote,
right,
you
right,
vote to-
right.
And we can argue this case the second time.
Any other questions council has at this time? Can I have a,
Motion to introduce this item as an ordinance for the second reading coming up at the next meeting, or whenever by title only. Thank you.
do I have,
Second.
okay, I have a motion and a second on the item as discussed. Item number 5. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
None opposed, let the motion show that it was 5-0.
Mr. Mayor, let's read the title.
Pardon me?
Let's read the title. I'll do that.
Okay.
It's an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Tehachapi to amend ordinance number 143717, sections 32030, 32040, 32050, 32060, 32070, 32080, 32090, 33030, 33040, 33050, 33060, 33070, 33080, 33090, 330-100, 110, 120, 130, 140, 150, 420-40, 610-10, 620, 620-20, 620-60, 620-80, 620-90, 620-140, 910-20, 960-40, 1110-20. Let's don't do this again, Jay.
You sounded like an auctioneer. Glad I didn't raise my hand. Okay, let's move on to item number 6. Yeah, I thought we did. Can we vote?
Yeah, you did vote.
Not yet.
Yeah, we did.
Did they vote yet?
Yeah, we're good. Yeah, we voted.
Oh, okay.
Well, he's reading the title
Okay.
after you voted.
He wrote,
We
yeah.
just came back around, so.
Okay, item number 6.
Very good. Honorable Mayor, council members, the second item for you is the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Program Park and Ride and Transit Center Project. Tonight's item is the Union Pacific ground lease and the CEQA document approval. So as background, you guys will recall, I'll go back quickly to 2015. We were directed to apply for a CMAQ, or Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Program funds, to design and construct a park and ride and transit facility on the north side of Tehachapi Boulevard, roughly between Mill and Polly Streets. We were successful in that application, and we've been working through the design and environmental stages, as well as beginning the process of working with Union Pacific to obtain a land lease for that property, which, as you guys will recall, a few months ago I came to you and introduced that lease to you and told you that at some time in the hopefully near future we would be ready to approve that lease. So that's what's happening tonight. We are proposing to construct a park and ride facility in this location, including bus turnouts for both east and westbound traffic for the current regional transit shuttles. The initial project layout includes 100 to 120 parking spaces. The proposed Union Pacific lease, which I attached, has not significantly changed, or frankly hasn't changed at all since the last time I introduced it to you all. It is attached in your packet. It has been reviewed by the city attorney. It proposes 3 consecutive 5-year terms. The city initially begins paying $17,390 annually to lease this approximate 1-acre property. The lease itself has some caveats for the raising of that lease value as the years go by based upon consumer price index. And then also a reconsideration at the 5-year intervals. The lease fiscal impact is the city, as with the city's other Union Pacific leases, the general fund is required to cover this cost. Grant funds cannot be used for the ongoing maintenance expense, which this would count for. So that initial lease payment of $17,390 is required to initiate the lease, and this amount is not currently budgeted. City staff proposes to make the necessary adjustments during the mid-year budget process. I would ideally like to wait until after the mid-year budget process, but in order to keep the project on schedule, and most importantly, as we know, on a nice cold night like tonight, hit our weather window for construction in spring, summer, and fall of next year, I'm asking that we move forward tonight. In addition to that lease, the CEQA document, or California Environmental Quality Act negative declaration, was prepared by city staff for this project. It was circulated on July 27th of 2017, as is our statutory requirement for a 30-day review. We did receive 1 set of comments from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. You humorously thought there might be a wetlands on the site. We dealt with that issue and corresponded with them, but as a reminder to you all, CEQA law does not require a formal response to comments for a negative declaration. So we didn't include a formal response in tonight's document, but please be assured we did communicate, and they were satisfied with our communication. They said, "Oh, never mind, all right, we understand."
Depends what time of year it is.
Yeah. So, anyways, the initial study and negative declaration are attached to the report as well, and all the statutory requirements of the CEQA process have been maintained, and we're ready for formal adoption of that document by you all tonight. Therefore, my recommendation is the approval of the proposed Union Pacific ground lease, as well as allocation of the necessary funds as recommended by the City Finance Director. I also further recommend adoption of the negative declaration prepared for the City of Tehachapi Park and Ride Transit Center project. I'm happy to answer your questions.
This time, is there anybody in the audience that wishes to make a comment?
Good evening. David Butler, City of Tehachapi resident and city planning member. 2 questions. Is there going to be any kind of pedestrian access across the tracks from the parking lot to the other side of the railroad tracks?
No, the railroad is almost vicious about no new at-grade crossings. So yes, no, there's no new crossing.
Okay. And what about the picture of the existing building, awning things there now?
That would be slated to be demolished.
Any other questions? Seeing none, council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a question, I believe, probably for you, Mr. Schroeder. Under Exhibit C, Paragraph B of their agreement, that specifically pertains to business automobile coverage. And in that particular paragraph, it says that each of these vehicles is required to have a minimum of $2 million in liability insurance. I don't think there's a whole lot of people that cover, with the exception of some commercial operators, individuals don't carry a policy of that level. How are we as the lessee going to ensure that people that are using that lot, that we lease as a city of Tehachapi, have a level of insurance that satisfies the Union Pacific Railroad?
Well, I don't know how we're gonna monitor it. You'll have to ask the planning director or the city manager.
I'm sorry, which section?
Paragraph B on Exhibit C.
I'll get there. Not sure. The less, I don't
Well,
believe
this
that
seems
every.
to say, this only seems to say that we have to have that.
Yeah, I believe that, yeah, that's my interpretation, is that the lessee must maintain this coverage, not yeah, that's the leading sentence of Exhibit C, is the lessee shall at sole cost and expense procure and maintain during the life of the lease the following insurance coverage. We have to maintain the business automobile coverage, which Mr. Shore did review specifically the insurance requirements of this project. We did modify the language a little bit, and we're confident we can supply the insurance they're requesting.
If you go to the parenthetical in the end of that first paragraph, it talks about including owned, hired, and non-owned autos.
We have that.
Okay, you're confident that we're covered with that 2
Well, I
million?
believe the RMA covers that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
we're satisfied.
Thanks. That was the first question. And then, Mr. Schlosser, this goes to you regarding the CEQA document on page 26, section C. And I appreciate what you said. There's really not a need to respond to some of these negative declaration items, but, you know, I have to question, you know, talking about drainage in this particular case. You know, that lot right now is basically compacted DG or gravel. There's not a whole lot of drainage involved with that. It basically percolates back into the ground unless we have a torrential downpour. When we come in and pave that, there will be a substantial amount of runoff coming off of that particular parking lot. Do we truly feel that that's not an issue for that area, or do we feel that we will need to increase the size of our storm drains to satisfy, you know, potentially additional runoff from a paved area?
2 comments. The first is, in my experience, compacted DG is nearly the equivalent, almost in all cases, as paved road. It takes very little water in a storm drain before it begins the runoff process. The second one is we do have a significant and frankly oversized storm drain running down Tashby Boulevard. It's a 54-inch main under the road, which was designed for the build out of the Tashby Boulevard region. So I am confident that this project would not create an adverse drainage situation.
Okay, super. The next question goes to the chief. The CEQA basically says that we don't have any concern for police or patrol activities in that particular area. You know, we've got 120 cars that are potentially going to be parked in there, and I think the definition still may be a little bit TBD regarding, you know, is it 100 or is it 120? But if you look at the number of cars that are currently parked behind Kmart during a typical commuting day, and that overflow has now sort of moved over to Albertsons. You know, we've sort of heard complaints about that in the past. Let's just say that we've got 100 to 120 vehicles in that particular area. Do we feel that there is sufficient coverage for our officers to be able to stroll through that lot, you know, take note of what's going on without any impact to their normal duties during the day?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, in addition to our officers, a deterrent to crime is also other people in the area. Tashby Boulevard, very highly traveled area at all hours of the day and night. Mr. Swalzer's plan has accounted for appropriate lighting in that area with the fencing that's going to be constructed along the railway there to prevent the pedestrian traffic from coming over the railway there. I think it's going to be safely a good place to park the car.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Do we have any plans for security cameras in that area?
There's discussion with Kern Regional Transit about the ownership of some cameras in that area. Those discussions are admittedly limited, though, to the security associated with the bus traffic in that area. Otherwise, we've not, you know, it's that delicate balance between, do we want to have a bunch of government cameras pointing all over the place? You want that in certain cases for security, and in other cases it makes people nervous, I think, for valid reasons. So my belief is that between the security fencing and the lighting that Chief and I have discussed, the general traffic in that area, and then the lighting and security cameras associated with the transit piece, that's going to be pretty good security. We can always make an adjustment and add cameras if we find ourselves with a chronic crime problem. But my initial feel is that we've got the right balance right now.
Okay, great, thank you on that. As a commuter for many years, I would actually prefer to have, while I'm not there, security cameras looking out for my vehicle to make sure that somebody doesn't do something. So I think from this particular council member's perspective, I think the cameras would be a great idea, and if we could broaden that with the transit folks to sort of be fully encompassing, it may be beneficial. And we could even advertise that as a fully secure parking lot. Public Works Department. Ryan, do you feel that any maintenance obligations that could come up, and this goes back to that same page 33 of the CEQA document. Do you feel that your folks are positioned to, I mean, I assume we're going to have trash cans, other types of things over there that Public Works would typically address. Do you feel that your group is suited to handle some of those additional items or work tasks during the day?
Yeah, good question. I do believe we have the ability to manage that additional paving and facility. I don't think, the addition of a single, 1 or 2 trash cans here and there, not that big of a deal. Jay and I have actually talked about ways to change the layout of the parking lots. We can maximize the equipment we have rather than doing it by hand. So we've been engaged in conversations, but I think we should be able to handle the maintenance.
Okay, great. And again, the reason I'm bringing this up is because it was purely listed as a negative declaration item on the CEQA. There's no impact, when actually, there's going to be more patrol, there's going to be more support from Public Works. So, it is a discussion item I think that we need to be fully aware of. And then the final point that I have is on page 36 regarding traffic. As you said, Tehachapi Boulevard is very busy, numerous times in the day. Do we feel that with the ingress and egress in and out of that parking area, will there be issues associated? I mean, let's just say quitting time for when a truckload of or a busload of commuters comes back, there could be 20 or 30 cars all trying to get out of the parking lot at once onto a very busy street when high school just got out. Are we prepared for those types of things? I mean, it's a little Tehachapi, but it was listed in the CEQA as not an issue.
Yeah. Well, a couple things. One, the threshold in CEQA, just as a reminder, is significant impact, not zero impact. So, we can still make a negative declaration even when there are some impacts, but we only need to go to a higher level document or higher level studying when we feel like there's the risk of being a significant impact. And I think that's what you're aiming at with these questions. Is there an impact to moving traffic to that location? Sure. There's an impact to doing just about anything that we do. I think the transit situation gets a lot better. Right now, we have buses pulling up and queuing in front of Kmart and then ultimately taking trips into the neighborhood kind of around that, whereas this rerouting of that same bus traffic to a new location with pullouts makes for a better, quicker commute, better traffic, smoother traffic for bus traffic. And as far as the parking lot is concerned, sure. Yeah, could you get a dose of 20 cars leaving all relatively at the same time? Yes. Would there be an impact to local roads? Yes. Do I think it would likely breach the kind of significance barrier? No. I mean, if there's a 30-second delay to get out of the parking lot, that doesn't, in traffic terms, that may be frustrating for all of us, but in traffic terms, that doesn't constitute a significant issue. So we didn't feel like it was worthy of additional study. I mean, when we look at something that's typically what we do, we look at 50 traffic counts at an instantaneous moment as being kind of a reason to consider additional traffic consideration. In this case, we didn't think that was a likely problem. So
okay, and then finally, that particular area, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I saw that we are actually double yellowed past that entire area. So that would imply that you cannot come out of that parking lot to do a left turn across the double yellow eastbound on Tehachapi Boulevard. Will there be modifications to that double yellow with a turning lane or something?
Yeah, so the two driveways that will access the parking lot are going to align with the intersections at Poly and Tehachapi Boulevard.
Okay.
Thereby making two three-way intersections into two four-way intersections. So we'll stripe it all and put in crosswalks, etc., for the safe transportation of passengers across those areas, add lighting, etc. So it's a $1.4 million project, and these are some of the components that we breeze by when you give you the presentation, but that are in the project. So yeah, no problem.
So you say intersection, will we see stop signs, or will it continue to be only a I guess, a one-way stop
Yeah, we're
coming off of Poly or coming
Correct.
off of Mill onto Tehachapi Boulevard?
There's discussion here internally. We haven't made a final decision about whether Mill and Tehachapi Boulevard ought to become a four-way stop in order to slow traffic as they're coming around that bend before coming into the downtown area. We're still considering that. I don't know that it's likely to meet the warrant requirements. It becomes a kind of a discussion of and we convene, internal traffic meetings about once every 2 months with myself, Ryan, and the chief to discuss any issues that have arisen. This project's on one of those upcoming meetings. So we've discussed it. We haven't made a final decision on that, but we certainly do have an eye for making sure that if we put these in, we can handle cars safely.
Or we could even put it in a roundabout. Right?
Yeah.
That'd be a good one. Okay, well, that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other comments then by, yeah.
Great project for commuters. It's actually improving the commuting experience, whatever you want to call it. Because they're right now already utilizing, like you say, Albertsons and Kmart parking lots that don't have the refined or the improved turnouts and things. So now you're doing a very defined plan that is for this type of event versus using someone's parking lot. So I think it's a very good improvement to the downtown, very good improvement to people who do commute, and it lends itself to the CMAQ is congestion management, air quality. So when you invite more people to commute, you're actually reducing pollution. Whether we have it up here that much, it does make a difference. So we're using monies that we're getting, that we all pay and send to Sacramento, we're getting some back for good use. So I always, whenever we can do that, that's super. Good project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Do I have a motion?
So move, as staff presented.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second on the item as discussed. Item number 6. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
None opposed? Let the record show 5-0 ayes. Item number 7.
Very good. Honorable Mayor, council members, my third item for you tonight is a collection of technically capital projects, although they're all fairly small in amounts of money compared to our other capital projects at least. The title is the 2017 City Hall Finance Relocation and City Hall Annex Repair Projects. I have 3 bids that I'm going to ask you to award tonight. So, city staff identified and budgeted for several improvements to both City Hall and City Hall Annex buildings in fiscal year 17-18. 2 principal activities are listed in your staff report. One is the relocation of the city's finance department from their current location upstairs in City Hall to the space that was previously occupied by a community development a few years ago. And then also to repair I mistitled this, so forgive me, the west wall of the City Hall Annex, although the project is titled the East Wall Repair. So I just had the 2 elevations mixed up in my mind. But anyway, we're talking about the west wall of the City Hall Annex building, including a fresh coat of paint for the building's exterior. The work was divided into 3 contracts, all 3 of which were advertised on November 1st, and bid openings were received on November 28th. They're summarized as follows. The City Hall Finance Relocation Flooring Project is just the removal and replacement of the flooring in the space that Finance will receive. We did receive 1 bid for this work from Michael Flooring Incorporated of $11,767.04. The City Hall Annex East Wall Repair, also known as the West Wall. The project includes the removal and replacement of a portion of the east elevation wall of the City Hall Annex building. The replacement includes 2 new windows as well. We received 2 bids as listed there. The low bid from Riviera Lath and Plastering for $6,750 was included. And then the City Hall Finance Painting, we oddly enough had quite a few interested parties in getting a painting contract from the city. Then that's patch and repaint of the interior of City Hall for the finance relocation, the exterior of the City Hall Annex building, which still proudly supports the police blue colors. So we're looking to make that change. We received quite a few bids that are listed there in my staff report. We did do a responsiveness review of all 3 of the bid sets, and all 3 were deemed responsive by city staff. The bids provided by Michael Flooring Incorporated, Riviera's Lath and Plastering, and U.S. National Corporation respectively have been deemed responsive. The fiscal impact total for the 3 projects is $30,417.04. Approximately half of the necessary funds are drawn from the development services budget and were budgeted to address the modifications, and the remaining half of the necessary funds will be drawn from from the remaining loan proceeds as authorized by the City Council back in October 5th, 2015. Our recommendation, therefore, is threefold. First, that you award the City Hall Finance Relocation Project to Michael Flooring Incorporated in the amount of $11,767.04, and authorize the city manager to approve any necessary change orders up to a maximum of $2,000. I chose a number in this case instead of a percentage, which is usually what I request for change orders in each of these. But because the percentage is such a nominal amount of money, it doesn't necessarily guard against an unnecessary trip back here for what would likely be a very small modification to the contract. So that's why I've asked for even 2,000. Similarly, asking that you award the City Hall Annex East Wall Repair Project to Rivera's Lath and Plastering Incorporated in the amount of $6,750, and also authorize the city manager to approve any necessary change orders up to a maximum of $2,000. And lastly, to award the City Hall Finance Relocation Painting Project to U.S. National Corporation in the amount of $11,900, and authorize the city manager to approve any necessary change orders up to a maximum of $2,000. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, is there any questions from the audience? Seeing none, council?
Mr. Mayor, one clarification. You want our standard contract to be entered into with each one of these vendors, is that correct?
Yeah, so, yeah, for clarification, we do,
So we'll just add to the motion that they'll approve the standard contract that we enter into. with the
yeah,
vendors.
so please also, approve a standard public works contract as approved by the city attorney. We had a discussion today about exactly which contract to use and a couple of the provisions in it, and the city attorney's recommendation, which I completely agree with, is that we utilize a contract that he blesses for entering into these contracts. So, yeah, please add that modification to this.
Okay, so it'll be one motion though, right? Yeah, okay.
Motion on staff's recommendation with recommendation of city attorney for a standard contract.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second on the item as discussed. Item number 7. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
None opposed? Let the record show 5 ayes.
Hannah, is that gonna break your heart to not have to help those stairs again?
Yeah.
You're gonna have to find some other kind of exercise, Hannah, because going up and down them stairs is...
I go around the building.
Yeah. Okay. Item number 8.
Very good. Honorable Mayor and council members, my final item for you tonight is the Landscape and Lighting Assessment District Number 1. And actually, I think it's public hearing, so we should probably start there.
Oh,
and then
okay,
I'll give
it
you my
is.
staff report.
You're right. Public hearing, staff report, or correspondence rather.
Sorry. No correspondence. which is-
Okay. Staff report.
Very good. Yeah, it seems a little perfunctory since we have one vote to open tonight, but we've done this before. This is annexation number 15C to our Landscape and Lighting District. That is specifically for the pilot Flying J Travel Center project. So you guys, we brought this issue, we brought a draft report to you already, but the City Council orders the levies of assessments within Landscape and Lighting District Number 1, which is collected for the city. So tonight, we're going to ask that you annex, presuming the ballot comes in the way we expect it to, but that you annex 15C for fiscal year 18-19 into that district, subject, of course, to both the public hearing and the protest ballot process. On October 2nd, 2017, at the City Council meeting, the City Council adopted resolution numbers 4417 and 4517, initiating the proceedings and approving the preliminary engineering report and declaring its intent to levy these assessments within LLD number 1, annexation 15C. This action at that time set tonight as the time and place for the public hearing on this issue, starting at 6 p.m. The total annual maintenance and administration cost to this district as part of this annexation 15C is $7,160.28. Annual district costs are funded through the assessment placed on the property tax bill. So tonight, in short, we're going to hold the protest ballot proceeding, which is you're going to hear from the public if anyone has any comments that is in this district. There is only one property in this district. It is the Flying J Travel Center. And then we have received a ballot from them, a protest ballot, an opportunity for them to vote against this assessment if they wish to. And we need to see what the ballot proceedings or the results are, and then from there, hopefully order the levy and collection of the assessments within the district. So that's my recommendation, is So what's my recommendation? We're recommending that you adopt 2 resolutions subject to the results of the public hearing and protest ballot. So the next step would be to hear from the public if anyone has any questions they might have about this action.
I'd like to make a little, maybe add a little to what Jay's staff report talks about, and that is, we're talking about the Pilot Flying J and the medians or the islands that are in Tehachapi Boulevard. Those islands have been landscaped. So we're talking about the maintenance costs for those islands, right? Pilot Flying J agreed with us that they would pay for the maintenance of that landscaping. So tonight we have a ballot, they're gonna vote yes or no, annexing themselves into this district, thus taxing themselves for the landscaping.
Okay,
Okay?
all right. Is there any comment from the public regarding this issue? Seeing none, let's move on with the close the hearing at this time.
And then the next step is for the city clerk to open the ballot
Right.
and declare the result of the, if you'd like me to do it. Okay?
We have a yes vote? Or no, that's not?
Only, to clarify, only 1 ballot was mailed because only 1 property is included, and per the clerk's signature, which you'll keep in the file, they voted in favor of allowing the assessment to move forward. So, anybody would like to see that, that's the ballot results. Do we, I think officially, pardon me guys, well, that we've read it. So, the ballots have been counted, and I believe the next step is the first resolution declaring the results of the ballot election. So my recommendation is that you would approve the resolution of the City Council of the City of Tehachapi declaring the results of the property owner protest ballot proceedings conducted for the proposed levy of assessments relating to the annexation of territory to the Tehachapi Landscape and Lighting District Number 1 commencing in the fiscal year 18-19.
Okay,
So I'll make that motion. I'll second your motion.
I have a motion and a second on the item as discussed. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
None opposed? Motion carries, 5 ayes.
Very good. And so the next recommendation, final step would be, I recommend that you pass a resolution, the City Council of the City of Tehachapi, confirming the engineer's report regarding the annexation of the district of territory to the Tehachapi Landscape and Lighting District Number 1, the levy of annual assessments described therein, and the assessment diagram connected therewith, and ordering the levy and collection of assessments commencing in fiscal year 18-19 for said annexation.
Okay. Do I have a motion on that?
Sure, I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay. I have a motion and a second on the item as discussed. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Let the record show 5 ayes.
Thank you very much.
Is that it?
That's it.
That's great. Okay, item number 9.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor Grimes and City Council. Item number 9 is in relation to the transfer of the Tehachapi Grand Fondo. As you know, the 2017 Tehachapi Grand Fondo was another successful event. We had over 1,000 participants from all over, frankly, the world, but over 120 different cities in California and from, I think, 6 or 7 different states. Just a huge success, a big logistical success for all of the different agencies and public safety agencies in the community who all partnered together to make that event happen. As you're also aware, our former city employee and now the general manager of the Tehachapi Valley Recreation Parks District, Michelle Vance, has served as the primary organizer of the event and manager of the event. And with her transition to TVRPD, we had a long discussion internally about the possibility of transferring the event to TVRPD. We felt like it made a lot of sense. TVRPD is obviously our community's recreation provider. This is a recreation-focused event, similar to the 5Ks and 10Ks that they already organize and run. And they have staff that are dedicated to doing that on a regular basis. Initially, when we began the Grand Fondo, the intent was actually that it would be a nonprofit event, that we would help a nonprofit get this event going and let it take off from there. But those nonprofits, have limited resources, right? And having paid staff members to be able make this event the huge success that it is really an important part of the process. So we debated that around a lot internally. We had discussions with TVRPD. Their board actually voted on the idea last week and is in support of accepting the event. And as part of that transfer, we would suggest that the city retain the right to assume responsibility back for the event if for some reason TVRPD decided they didn't want to do it anymore, if participation significantly declined or something like that. Because it is a premier event now in not just Tehachapi, but in Kern County. In addition, as part of the transfer, we would transfer some of the physical assets that were purchased by the Gran Fondo event, namely the starting archway, the route arrows, those are the stickers that go on the ground, signage and those kinds of things that are specific to running the event. As I mentioned back last week, on November 28th, the TVRPD board voted to accept the event, subject to the decision of the City Council. And tonight we would recommend that the City Council agree to transfer the Tehachapi Gran Fondo to the Tehachapi Valley Recreation and Parks District, including those assets purchased by the Gran Fondo, including logos, websites, and other items used exclusively for putting on the event. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any comments from the public?
Good evening, Council. My name is Laura Lynn Wyatt. I am currently the chair of Tehachapi Recreation Parks District Board of Directors. As Assistant City Manager Kirk did allude to, my board did vote unanimously last week. We are ready to accept this prestigious event that the community is responsible for. As you all know, we serve the greater Tehachapi community with the exception of Bear Valley Springs and Stallion Springs. They have their own recreation districts, okay? So we serve Alpine Forest, we serve Sand Canyon, Golden Hills, as well as the city of Tehachapi. The route of the Gran Fondo actually runs through all those communities. So we think it's a perfect fit. We thank you in advance for your trust and your vote of confidence. Thank you very much.
If I may, I'd like to point out a couple of other quick items. The intent is that the city would still support the event, both directly and indirectly, as we do for a lot of the large events in town, like the Mountain Festival, and those kinds of things. We provide traffic control and public safety support. This would be no different in our opinion. And while the event is self-supporting, the goal has always been to be effectively a break-even, right? And so, quote, profit that the event generates, we've given out to local nonprofits that support the event. As some of you know who were here a couple of weeks ago, we gave out over $17,000 to local public safety volunteer groups and other nonprofits that support the event and really, frankly, make it a possibility. There's over 200 volunteers that help put this event on. It couldn't be done without them. And so this year, even after giving out those funds to local nonprofits, those are agreed upon amounts prior to the event. The event looks like it cleared roughly $7,800. It brought in over $134,000 in total revenue between sponsorships, registration, so on and so forth. So it costs a lot to put the event on, but the event pays for itself for all intents and purposes and still has some funds left to go to local nonprofits, and we fully expect that TVRPD would continue that tradition moving forward.
Okay. Any other comments? Council?
Yeah, I do. Chris, what's our kind of in lieu services, dollar amount, ballpark?
We charge ourselves for public works time, specifically during the course of the event. That runs, I think last year was around $9,000. This year was a little less. We're getting more efficient at putting on the event. So and some of that stuff that we probably won't do in the future, we'd be providing a little less direct support because TVRPD will have the staff to do some of the things that we typically do in terms of putting out signs and setting up the archway. This year, myself, Mr. Montgomery, and a couple of our public works guys were out at 4 in the morning putting up the archway and stuff like that. We wouldn't necessarily do in the future.
And the recreation district knows these costs?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, Ms. Vance, who worked for us previously, was a huge part in making this event a reality, in addition to all the other city staff that had a hand in this. But, she's intimately familiar with how the event runs, how much it costs to put on, the logistics associated with it, and she's the general manager of Parks District, so they definitely understand what they're getting themselves into. I don't want to speak on their behalf, but I certainly expect that.
Any other questions? Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
I have a motion and a second on item number 9 as discussed. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
None opposed? Motion carries. It's your baby now.
Thank you. Thank you for your trust.
It's your baby again. Let's put it that way. Let the record show 5-0. Our next order of business, item number 10. And it's a second reading and adoption of an ordinance relating to electing city council members by districts.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to introduce someone we all know, Justina Aziz, to guide us through this last step of the process.
Good evening, members of the City Council. Honorable Mayor, I'll start by giving a brief summary of the staff report, and then I'll be happy to take questions. Because the City of Tehachapi is a general law city, it adheres to the requirements set forth in the Government Code for adopting ordinances, and the Government Code requires 2 readings of all standard ordinances more than 5 days apart. This proposed ordinance establishes district-based elections for the City Council commencing with the November 2018 general municipal election. The ordinance was first introduced at a regularly scheduled meeting on November 20th, 2017. At that meeting, the City Council also adopted the purple map, which is here. The map has been attached as Exhibit A to the proposed ordinance, and it was relabeled as Council Adopted Map. The ordinance reflects also the sequence of elections that corresponds with the Council's adopted map. The ordinance will become effective 30 days after adoption pursuant to Government Code Section 36937. The recommended action is to conduct the second reading and adopt the ordinance. This concludes the staff report. I'll be happy to take questions.
So,
Any questions from the
any questions? Yeah. Any questions from the public regarding this issue? Okay, seeing none. Council?
I have just one question, Mr. Mayor, thank you. In reading the ordinance itself, as it has been proposed, I do not see a reference to what would happen should a participant surface from any particular district to participate in the election. We've sort of presented a menu in the ordinance for all of the other aspects of how this districting voting process will work. I did not see anything in it as written thus far on what happens if nobody decides to run from a particular district. And I think that's important that we define that. And I believe that the result would be the council would appoint somebody to represent that district. If that's not correct, I'd like clarification on that tonight. And I think it is crucial that we have that language that addresses what happens if somebody chooses not to run in a particular district, how that's portrayed in the ordinance.
You want to respond to that, Justina?
Sure. So you are correct that somebody would be appointed, and they would have to be appointed from the district where that seat is representing. And that's set forth in the Government Code. And so it's sort of the default rule.
Okay,
State law takes care of that.
State law takes care of that. However, would it not be beneficial, Mr. Schroeder, to actually have that defined in our ordinance? Even a reference back to the state law specifically to address an appointment?
I don't think so. I mean, it's up to you if you want to put it in, but it's clear. And there's always the chance that you put in your ordinance, state law changes a little bit if your ordinance is inconsistent with that.
Well, you know as well as I do that state law is as clear as mud.
No, it's not. It's pretty
Well,
clear.
it is. I mean, when a citizen is reading our ordinances and they're trying to figure out how this process will work going forward, you know, I think it's crucial, you know, without them having to go back to volumes of state law to figure out where, you know, an appointment or how an appointment process would be made. It would be very simplistic if we just listed that in our particular ordinance to define that.
Well, we just did it with the city treasurer. I mean, it's clear, the staff report telling you what your option would be would spell it out. No, it's up to you. If you want her to insert it into there, you can do that.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea that we have as much clarification in the ordinance as possible to make it clear for our citizens. Our citizens deserve to understand their laws locally in as simple a fashion as possible without having to refer or go Google, you know, some other list of laws and requirements from the state of California.
It's not going to be any simpler in our ordinance than it is in the government code.
But it's not in the ordinance, though.
Well,
It's not written in
It
the ordinance.
is, because state law covers it. But I guess you might want to make a motion to see if the council wants to insert it into the ordinance.
Okay, great, thanks. That's my only comment.
Did you want to make that motion?
Well, I'd like to hear what some of the other council members have just regarding the commentary on the entire process.
I'm totally satisfied with the ordinance as presented, and that it does encompass the state law to back up what happens in the event that someone does not run in that district. I'm certain that this would be very well published to everyone, you know, who's maybe running for election, what could happen if there's an empty seat. So I don't see the need for redundancy here, so I'm in favor of moving forward exactly the way we have. I don't want to change anything or throw something in here where we mess up the timetable. I'm satisfied with it and being supported by state law. Thank you.
Well, I don't have a problem whatsoever with sticking that in there, and I'd like to, same as Mr. Heckey, I'd like to see things be as clear as possible. And, you know, it's on the computer, what's it take? 3-4 minutes to put that in there? And just so people that, when they read it, they know exactly what they're reading, they know exactly what they're seeing, and they don't have to go look at the state law, you know? It just seems too easy just to stick it in there.
Okay. Susan?
I think we're selling our residents short. Anything that's implied by state law and any other ordinance, we don't spell everything out. And I think our people who live in Tehachapi are not simplistic, and they'll figure that out, so I'm not in favor of inserting that either.
Okay, my feeling would be that it's, as Phil said, the redundancy of it, I don't think it's necessary. I think it's spelled out, you know, by state law, and let it be at that.
I just have one other comment, Mr. Mayor. If that's the philosophy, then I think that we can probably shave down the ordinance as it's written and just refer back to state law. We can knock off about 3 or 4 paragraphs in here if I've read this properly or correctly. So if we, you know, we either make it clear for the public or we shave it down and just say, you know what, we're doing this per the state law and call it good. So, I mean, it's one or the other. We either try to make it accessible, readable, understandable to our citizens, or we put one line in there and say, we're doing this per state law. If you have any questions, refer back to it. But well, we could do it. We could do it if we voted on it. We could sure do it. So I would like to make a motion that we add the language to very clearly define what happens if we do not have a candidate come from a particular district, and that the remaining city council members appoint a replacement or a person from that district to fill the voided seat. And that's my motion.
I would just like to point out that today is a 90-day deadline.
Yes.
And so if you were to add a provision, you would start again with.
You have to reintroduce, correct?
Right, that is correct.
So,
But that's still.
that's why I said I want to move forward. I don't want any delays of this, but that's your motion. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's my motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second on the item as discussed to add clarification, if you will. Would you want to read that again?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, it's very simple. Just clarification would be that if we have no candidate that comes forward from a particular district, that the council, the remaining seated council, then appoints somebody to represent that district.
Okay.
And, plus or minus a few words in there, but that's the gist of what the motion is.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No. So the motion fails. Do I have a motion on the, to adopt the ordinance amending the municipal code, providing for the election of 5 members of the council by districts, establishing the boundaries and identification number of each district, and establishing the election order of each district? Do I have a
So
motion?
moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second on the item as discussed. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
None opposed? Okay.
You kind of read the title, Justina. I think that's okay?
I think that's fine.
Could you pass that by title only? That's on the agenda. We usually read the title, but the mayor read that.
Yeah, okay.
For
All right.
clarification,
Thank you.
was it, for clarification, was it 5-0?
5-0.
5-0, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item number 11, regarding the commercial cannabis activity and uses. I'm going to open the hearing at this time to proclaim that this is a public hearing. Was there any correspondence?
No correspondence was used.
No correspondence. Staff report?
Yes, I'd like to further introduce Ms. Maricela Maripon of Richard Johnson and Gershon, and the same firm as Gina here. You're all familiar with it.
The presentation.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. I am here today to discuss the draft cannabis ordinance that is before you tonight. As you know, the City Council Subcommittee was established, there was a City Council Subcommittee on marijuana that was established to determine what, if any, cannabis-related businesses would be compatible with the city. And based on the input that we received from that subcommittee, we took that content to put together the ordinance that is before you tonight. Before we discuss the ordinance, I thought it would be helpful to provide a little bit of background information regarding the state of cannabis law. It's not going to be very long, but just so you have kind of the basic background. So, in talking about cannabis, we always have to start with federal law. The Federal Controlled Substances Act classifies marijuana as a Schedule I drug, which is defined as a drug that has a high potential for abuse, has no currently accepted medical use for the treatment in the United States, and has not been accepted as safe for use for any of its medical purpose. So this is kind of how the federal law views cannabis. I know there's people in the medical profession that may disagree, but this is what the federal law is. So under the Federal Controlled Substances Act, it's unlawful under federal law for a person to cultivate, manufacture, distribute, or dispense, or possess with the intent to manufacture, distribute, or dispense marijuana. And so because it's illegal under federal law, any ordinance that regulates rather than prohibits commercial cannabis activity would be contrary to federal law. So moving on to state law. So we have now this dichotomy where there's a difference between how the federal law treats cannabis and how the state treats cannabis. In 2015, the state adopted the Medical Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act, which established a state regulatory scheme for medical cannabis businesses. Then in 2016, there was a voter initiative, Prop 64, which legalized the personal use and cultivation of cannabis for those who are 21 years of age or older, and also established a state licensing scheme for adult use cannabis businesses. Notably, Prop 64 retained local control for cities. The cities are still allowed to completely prohibit the establishment of any cannabis-related businesses within their city, or to regulate if that's what the city so chooses. What the city cannot do is cannot prohibit the cultivation of up to 6 plants indoors within a primary residence. That's the one right in terms of land use that a person has listed and cannot improve on. So with respect to Prop 64, Tehachapi voters, although in the state Prop 64 passed, within Tehachapi, the voters voted against Prop 64. It was a 47.4 in favor, 52.6 against. And that's similar to the numbers that we saw for the Tehachapi County area. So the areas that are unincorporated voted 44 voted in favor, 56 voted against, or percent voted against. So this year, in June of this year, the governor signed into law the Medicinal and Adult Use Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act. So what this did is it harmonized both what was previously the MCRSA, which dealt with medical cannabis, and Prop 64, which dealt with adult use cannabis, and created a single regulatory scheme to address both. Under this scheme, the state licensing authority shall not approve an application for a state license for a cannabis business if approval of that state license is going to violate any local ordinance. The state is going to begin issuing those licenses come January 1st, 2018. So if the city does not have on its books an ordinance prohibiting commercial cannabis activity, someone would be able to apply at the state for a business license to operate, or I'm sorry, state license to operate within Tehachapi. So what the reason we're here is to kind of retain that local control, to make sure that the city is making the decision that it wants, and that is why the ordinance is that's before you tonight. The city is required under the MAU-CRSA to provide the Bureau of Cannabis Control with a copy of any local ordinance regulating commercial cannabis activity. So currently, there are no permanent regulations addressing cannabis within the city's code. The city did establish a moratorium on all commercial cannabis activity. That moratorium is set to expire in November 2018. So you have some interim prohibitions in place, but you do not have any permanent regulations in place. So what's being proposed is amendments to Title 18, which is the zoning code, and commercial cannabis uses and commercial cannabis activity are expressly prohibited. The city shall not issue a building permit, conditional use permit, variance, or any other entitlement for any commercial cannabis use. A property owner shall not rent, lease, or otherwise permit any person to engage in commercial cannabis activity on such owner's property. And the amendments also establish cannabis cultivation regulations. So commercial cannabis activity is defined to include the cultivation, possession, manufacture, distribution, processing, storing, laboratory testing, packaging, labeling, transportation, delivery, or sale of cannabis and cannabis products. That definition comes directly from state law. It also includes the activities of any business licensed by the state or any other governmental entity under Division 10 of the Business and Professions Code. That's the division that now has the MAU-CRSA is now codified in Division 10. So we added that to the definition. So should the state tomorrow add another activity to this list, we wouldn't need to come back and amend the ordinance again. And this applies to both medicinal and adult use cannabis. So commercial cannabis activity does not include the cultivation, possession, storage, manufacturing, or transportation of cannabis by a qualified patient for his or her personal medical use, so long as the qualified patient does not provide, donate, sell, or distribute cannabis to any other person. The cultivation, possession, storage, manufacturing, transport, donation, or provision of cannabis by a primary caregiver exclusively for the personal medical purposes of no more than 5 specified qualified patients is also not included within that definition, and that also comes directly from state law. Commercial cannabis use is defined as any use of real property in the city which consists of, in whole or in part, any commercial cannabis activity. So, turning our attention to cannabis cultivation, under the proposed amendments to the code, cannabis cultivation is prohibited outdoors. So that's something the city has the option. Under state law, the city can either allow or not allow outdoor cultivation. The direction we received was prohibit all outdoor cultivation, which is why it's included within the proposed code amendments. Up to 6 cannabis plants may be cultivated indoors at a private residence or inside a fully enclosed and secure structure located upon the grounds of a private residence. That also comes from state law in terms of the city cannot prohibit the cultivation of up to 6 plants. A private residence is defined as a house, an apartment unit, a mobile home, or other similar dwelling. Again, that definition of private residence comes directly from state law as well. A fully enclosed and secure structure we've defined as a space that satisfies all the following criteria. It's located within a private residence or an accessory structure, like a greenhouse that's located upon the grounds of a private residence. It has a complete roof enclosure supported by connecting walls extending from the ground to the roof. It's secure against unauthorized entry. It provides complete visual screening. It is accessible only through 1 or more lockable doors, and it is inaccessible to minors. And so these regulations were put in place to try to limit the people that have access to the cultivation that's occurring within the primary residence. There are some additional state law requirements that are not included within the ordinance, but that are just come directly from state law that I thought you should be aware of. Any plants, the plants and any cannabis produced by the plants in excess of 28.5 grams, which is an ounce of cannabis, must be kept within the person's private residence or on the grounds of that residence. It has to be kept in a locked space, and it can't be visible by the normal unaided vision from a public place. There are some exceptions to the ban. It doesn't prohibit transportation of cannabis and cannabis products through city territory on public roads. That comes from state law. State law dictates that we can't, that a city cannot prohibit cannabis from passing through. So if there's a neighboring city that allows cannabis and they're transporting to another city that allows it, a city can't say you can't use our roads for that. We also included a catch-all exception that says that it doesn't prohibit any activities the city is required by state law to permit within its jurisdiction. So there are some provisions within the Business and Professions Code that say that for R&D purposes, small amounts of cannabis, which they don't qualify, can be had by business for using to create marijuana accessories, and so we can't prohibit that under state law. CEQA, the ordinance we've determined is exempt pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15061B3 because it can be seen with certainty that prohibiting all commercial cannabis activity and uses will not have a significant impact on the environment because there won't be any uses allowed. Likewise, the 15035 exemption applies when there's minor alterations in land use limitations with an average slope of less than 20%, and such alterations do not result in changes in land use or density, which again, because all uses would be prohibited, we could rely upon that exemption. With respect to cannabis deliveries, there was, I wanted to point out, so in your agenda packets, you'll see there were 2 versions of the ordinance that were included. So attachment 1 is the ordinance as presented tonight, which is the complete prohibition. Attachment 2 is an ordinance that prohibits all commercial cannabis activity but allows deliveries. So the reason that you have 2 in your packet is that initially the marijuana subcommittee provided direction saying prohibit all commercial cannabis activity but allow cannabis deliveries. And the reason that that direction was provided, it's my understanding, was because the thought was that the county of Kern was going to allow some segments of the cannabis business industry to operate within the unincorporated areas of Kern County. And so, however, on October 24th, the Kern County Board of Supervisors actually voted to prohibit all commercial cannabis activity, and so that was a change of direction from what everyone thought was going to happen. And as a result of that, the marijuana subcommittee met again and unanimously voted to go ahead and move forward with an ordinance that prohibits all commercial cannabis activities. So we were provided direction to revise the ordinance, which is why you have this revised ordinance before you tonight. However, you obviously have the discretion to adopt either ordinance or, any other type of ordinance you want regulating commercial cannabis activity. I would like to remind the council, however, that we are operating under a time frame in terms of the state's going to start issuing those licenses January 1st. So if you want to do anything other than prohibit commercial cannabis activity, I would recommend that we still go forward with the prohibition and then provide direction to staff to say, let's study this a little bit more. Let's come up with a comprehensive ordinance that regulates, certain segments, and then we can come back with that ordinance at a later date. But that would still allow the council to retain that local control and not be in a situation where the state is just issues the licenses because there aren't any permanent regulations on the books. The Planning Commission, and at this time I did want to turn it over to Chief Kroger because I know that he had, he's part of the marijuana subcommittee and had some additional thoughts on the delivery issue.
Thank you. We felt it was important that council hear law enforcement's position on this issue prior to making a decision. You'll see in your staff report on item D, they mentioned a number of problems associated with cannabis businesses. This specifically is directed at cultivation and the dispensaries. The problems associated with the cultivation, the increase in crime associated with dispensaries, pretty significant issues that have been experienced by cities in California with dispensaries and cultivation occurring in those areas. In addition to that, in October of 2017, the Rocky Mountain High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area released their 5th annual report on the impact of legalized marijuana in Colorado. This report addressed several critical issues, including impaired driving and fatalities, youth marijuana use, adult marijuana use, emergency department and hospital marijuana-related admissions, and crime statistics. This report revealed some very concerning findings. Marijuana-related traffic deaths increased 66% in the 4 years, since Colorado legalized recreational marijuana. 66% increase. And this would be traffic deaths where the driver was positive for marijuana. Youth past month marijuana use increased 12%. College age past month marijuana use increased 16%. The yearly rate of emergency department visits related to marijuana increased 35%. And crime in Colorado increased 11% since legalizing marijuana. With the legalization of marijuana, we're likely going to experience some of this impact. However, I believe we can reduce this impact by prohibiting all commercial cannabis activity in our community. We talk about the delivery of cannabis and cannabis products. There's some significant public safety concerns with the delivery of cannabis and cannabis products. Operators are delivering an extremely valuable product that's highly sought after, and it's in exchange for cash. This makes these delivery drivers, as well as those customers, extremely vulnerable to robberies, as well as residential burglaries. These things do occur with pretty great frequency.
A lot of times they're unreported or underreported. We recently had a murder in a neighboring jurisdiction, which is believed to have been related to a marijuana delivery. So I think there's some significant safety concerns there that we really need to consider. And as Maricela previously mentioned, we have the conflict of state law versus federal law. And I think we would be creating additional issues if we have a conflict with our city and what Kern County is doing. So in my opinion, it's in the best interest to prohibit all commercial cannabis activity in the city of Tehachapi. And I believe that allowing for any commercial cannabis activity creates greater opportunities for crime and could potentially endanger the public health, safety, and welfare of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, for that. Turning now to the Planning Commission's recommendation, the Planning Commission on October 9th conducted a public hearing on the proposed ordinance, and the proposed ordinance that was before the Planning Commission allowed the deliveries, so it was a ban on all commercial cannabis activity, but it had an allowance for deliveries. However, the delivery issue was not actually before the Planning Commission because that pertained to business license requirements, which are in your Title V of your code, not your Title 18, which is your zoning code, and Planning Commission only has jurisdiction over Title 18. So they voted 3-0 with one abstention to adopt a resolution recommending that the city adopt the zoning code amendments contained in the proposed ordinance. And staff is recommending that the city conduct a public hearing on the proposed cannabis ordinance that is included as an attachment 1, which is your complete ban, and at the conclusion of the public hearing, introduce and conduct a first reading of that ordinance, which is the complete ban. And I'm available for any questions.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I'm going to receive public comment. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to make a comment regarding this issue? Keep in mind you have 3 minutes.
Council, David Butler, citizen of the city. I was the abstaining vote in that planning commission meeting. We were also short one member. At that time, I voted abstention because I felt it hadn't gone far enough that we should, make some changes. But I think because we're under the deadline, I strongly agree with what already been proposed and hope they could vote for it.
Thank you. Anybody else?
My name's Rob McBride, and I live in the city of Tehachapi. I was wondering what the people that are have doctors' permissions, how are they supposed to get their medication? You just stated that all the crime and deliveries. Where does this happen at? Tehachapi? No. They don't run around with a, domino sign, I'm delivering weed. You're so wrong. And you know what? There's so many people in this town that smoke marijuana, that rely on it, and there's so many people that grow it. You guys are just, who's gonna finance the police? Who's gonna finance the jails? Who's gonna finance the courts, the paperwork, the jail systems? Who's gonna finance that? The people. There's people here that have doctors' permission to receive medical marijuana. And you think that somebody's gonna go do it for nothing? You ought to work for the city for nothing. That's what I think. There is nobody in their right mind wants to work for nothing. You all got an agenda on your mind. You all got something going. You all want to control everything. You don't listen to people, and you do whatever you want anyway, Mr. Garrett. I'm fed up with this, and I really don't care what you people do with this. And I got a little analogy to give you. It was from a grower named Sergeant Slaughter. and I'll give you the reason why. His name's Sergeant Slaughter afterwards. He's a guy that's been growing weed for like 20 years. And he has been doing it for all the troubles and everything else. And he's gonna continue to do it. He said that he thought that the city or the state might get wise and be able to control it and make some money off it. You talk about making pittance off the Grand Fondo, big deal. You guys can
Sir,
get
you have
something out
30
of it.
seconds. You have
Well,
30 seconds.
All right. He said, the heck with it. I'm gonna do the same thing I do now anyway. And he told me the reason why he called himself Sergeant Slaughter. He asked me to identify him as Sergeant Slaughter because he figured he'd get attention given a police rank. And he's called Sergeant Slaughter because he makes a killing selling weed. You guys are terrible, man. I'm not gonna do it. You guys really stink. Think about it.
Name is George Sandy, resident here for 25 years. I've never even sniffed marijuana, but aside from marijuana medication prescribed by doctors, I am unequivocally against raising, distribution, sale, handling, storage of marijuana anywhere in this nice little city we have. I have personal experiences with a man floating along on a cloud of marijuana that forced me off the road. And that just fits right in with the chief's evaluation. I think marijuana, and I could be wrong, but I think it's the first step that a lot of people take before they step to something stronger, something that gives them a little happier feeling, and we all like that. And if you get hooked, then you want something even better. So, again, I'm just unequivocally against it. I think it creates more problems than it solves.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Law Professor Barbara Reynolds, Tehachapi resident, 44 years. Honorable Mayor and Council, I concur with the participants in this opinion about marijuana and its growth here in town. Commercial marijuana, I certainly have quite a bit of disdain for. I'm a grandmother. I've been in this town for 44 years and intend to be here another 44 years. But if the council can clarify for us, I don't believe part of the amendment is a provision that prohibits the transportation for purposes of medical products. And perhaps council can lend some clarity on that issue. Thank you. Can you answer that?
Let's have that answer first, if you will, please.
Thank you, Mary.
The proposed ordinance would be a prohibition for both medicinal and adult use cannabis deliveries would be part of it. Now, of course, the council can choose to, there's option 2, which is allow those deliveries to occur. So there's a myriad of options that the council can choose from. But under state law, a city can prohibit all commercial cannabis activity, and people who are medical patients can certainly grow the cannabis up to 6 pounds within their own home. That is something the city cannot prohibit, or you're preempted from doing so.
Thank you for that clarification.
Mayor, may I make a quick amendment to that just for clarification purposes? It's also important to note, you can still go buy marijuana, medical or recreational, and transport it yourself back to your own home. We're only discussing having it delivered from the store to your home. So to the first person's comment and this one, if you need medical marijuana, you can still go purchase it legally outside the city and bring it to your own home. So the law doesn't allow us to prohibit that.
Okay, thank you.
Mary Ann Hester, been here over 50 years, raised 6 kids here. All 6 of them had marijuana problems. But I really thank the council for taking the strong stand that it's taken and setting up ordinances, and because I do know the effects. And if anybody's ever seen these things on Colorado, these guys are looking back at you just to think they're going to be ruling over you one day, running for political office. It's really scary. And I'd like to thank the chief for the speech he made, because every bit of it's truth. It's true. If anybody's got teenage kids, you know what we're all having to deal with. But you know what gets me? You have to have a caregiver. The taxpayers have to pay for a caregiver to give it to them. That blows my mind. Cats. Thank you.
I just want to say this most for the chief. As long, like, I'm okay with the not having it here or whatever, but like he said, if you want to bring it back in the city, as long as you guys are educated, like, on what we have, can't have, and, you know, so no one's getting in trouble or all that, you know what I mean? So, if the state says it's okay, we live in the state of California, you guys don't want to hear, that's fine, but if we can have it in our own homes, it's in our trunk of our car, it's legal amount, that shouldn't even be a ticket, right? So, as long as the police is educated on all that, there should be no problem with it.
Hey, sir, would you give your name and what area you live in?
Oh, I live here in town. My name is Robbie.
Robbie?
Kennelly.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Danny Swanson, Tehachapi City resident. Just so you guys know, I'm all pro medical, recreational. People like recreational. Just like to say, you guys say a better quality of life here around Tehachapi. A lot of these people, there's what, 44%, 46% of these people around Tehachapi need this medical marijuana for that better quality of life. So you're taking the quality of life away from some, but saying it's okay for others. We have wine walks, we have alcohol stores, we have cigarette stores every corner I look at almost. The supermarkets sell alcohol, supermarkets sell tobacco. Time to look at maybe including everybody in a better quality of life around here. And so people can't, not everybody has a car to drive out and go get their cannabis. Not everybody has the means of buying $500 for one light, one ballast, some fans, a tent, just to set up a little grow room and a spare room they have. People don't have that kind of money. People need the free sun, the free 6 plants they can put outside to be able to get their medication. So, yeah, I mean, you're gonna let them grow 6 indoor, that's great. What about the people that can't afford to grow 6 indoor? You guys got a lot more to think about, so I think you should put it off for a little while. Let's do some talking. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public?
Hi, my name is Missy Brown. I live in Tehachapi. This whole marijuana thing is ridiculous. It just causes too much damn chaos.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none at this time, I'm going to close the hearing and refer to staff. Want to read the ordinance again?
Well, are there any other comments from
Council? Council have any comments?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you'd like to start on the other side on this one, I would gladly give that up, but I'll leave it to you. I can go if you'd like.
No, that's fine. You know, I don't mind. I think everything that grows on the earth has got a use for it. And I think marijuana is no different. I don't know how, I see the common sense in trying to divvy up the, you know, where you go, you get your medical stuff and where you get your recreational stuff. Recreational, I'm not crazy about. But I do agree, and I wish there was more people in the audience actually that came up, that medical marijuana, you know, does have some merit, you know, but it's because of the way the state goes and because of the way the county's gone now, it's counterproductive for us to even you know, try to make an ordinance that you know, for anything concerning marijuana. I mean, it's so willy-nilly anyway, you know, it changes from day to day almost. But I don't think the medical part has is a big deal. Recreational, yeah, but, you know, we still haven't figured out how to separate that, and the state's not giving us any help whatsoever. So, that's kind of why I stand on
Okay. Go ahead.
My opinion is that we go along with the county for the complete ban, that we're in harmony with them, so that we don't have all these exception areas. You know, you have a city limits line now, are the police gonna have to deal with the exception just across the city limits or whatever? I think it's a very clean ordinance. We go with the county, and that's my opinion.
I worked with the Mojave Unified School District, and prior to that, I worked for a drug and alcohol agency, and a lot of my work was with students K-12, and I have seen marijuana. I've seen it smoked by all kinds of people, and I still believe it's a gateway drug, and I believe that because the federal government believes that. And having dealt with teenagers who had a really hard time getting off of it or didn't want to get off of it, it caused a lot of problems. And I'm perfectly happy with this ordinance the way it is.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under, and this may be a question for Mr. Schroeder, I'm not sure, but under discussion A, there seems to be something contradictory in here. We either prohibit the medical or we don't. If I read that first paragraph properly, under discussion A item,
I think you're, I'm sorry, go ahead.
is it full prohibition on both sides of the marijuana discussion? Is it prohibition on medical and on the recreational use?
Would you come up here to the podium and answer
Sorry, I kind of caught you off guard there.
Sure.
Yeah, this was under discussion item letter A, and it's specifically related to the first paragraph.
I'm not seeing where you're at, or the discussion A.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Well, you know what? You may be able to just
The
go ahead.
answer is yes, the ordinance is a provision on both adult use and medicinal cannabis.
Okay, all right.
So trying to, yes, so the discussion first talks about the zoning code provisions, which are a complete ban, and then mentions that you have the option of these two different versions. Attachment 1 is the complete ban, option 2 is allowing the deliveries if that's what you so choose to do.
Okay, great, thank you. I have very close friends who have been affected by very, very serious illnesses. Significant disfiguring rheumatoid arthritis, chemotherapy as a result of cancer, Parkinson's disease, and I want to make it clear, I am not pro recreational marijuana whatsoever. However, I think we, having myself experienced the result of what medical marijuana does for certain individuals, and a couple of these folks can't drive. I mean, they're past the point of being able to drive. And I appreciate what some of our audience members have said, and I don't disagree with that or those points. But having seen this work for a select group of people who truly need whatever it may be, an edible, baked into cookies, it's significant. And because I have experienced that, I cannot support the full prohibition of medical marijuana. I just can't support it because I've seen it work, I've seen it happen, I've seen the results, and I know that those people who are close friends of mine who cannot drive to get what they need to satisfy those problems and issues that they have due to illness, I think we should seriously consider taking the approach of allowing the medical marijuana to be delivered. And, you know, Chief, you'll have my full support on policing the process. But when you see that happen to people who truly need it, it's significant and it weighs on you. And that's my only comment. I think we need to protect the medical marijuana side of that and the delivery side of the medical marijuana. And if we want to prohibit the recreational side, I'm full in support of that, or in full support of that. But the medical side, I think we should take a very, very, very hard look at maintaining that for the people that truly need it. That's the only commentary I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So we have an introduction and first reading of an ordinance amending Title 18, the zoning code to prohibit all commercial cannabis activity, uses and outdoor cannabis cultivation, and to allow indoor cannabis cultivation consistent with state law and making environmental finding in support thereof. And that's the way the introduction to the ordinance would read.
That's correct. You just read the title. So there has to be a motion.
So
Yes.
move.
Second?
I have a motion and a second on the item as discussed. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'll abstain.
And I'm a no.
Okay, let the record show that it is a 3-1-1. Yeah, 3-1-1. The motion carries. At this time, city manager reports.
Thank you, Mayor Grimes. I'm going to be very quick. I'd just like to say thank you to the Main Street organization for a very successful wine walk last weekend. Gives the public a chance to go into small businesses downtown they might not necessarily ever visit. It was very successful, I understand. It was a sold-out event. Everybody behaved, and we'd like to thank Main Street for that. Also, I'd like to thank the Chamber of Commerce and the Tehachapi Valley Recreation Parks District for hosting over this last weekend a small business forum in the Aspen Gym. It was Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, so there were businesses in the gym that set up a booth, and you could go around and talk to them, learn more about who they are, what their businesses are all about. They are businesses that are working out of their homes, in the garages in most cases. So they don't have a storefront yet. Great springboard opportunity for them. So I'd like to thank the two organizations, the Chamber and the Parks District, for that. Just some great businesses, great people doing some great things. We're going to be working with all of them as we have been to help them grow their businesses as appropriate. Today, Mayor Grimes, Mayor Pro Tem Wiggins, and several staff members and I attended the ribbon cutting for the new Kern County Library branch, Tehachapi branch in downtown Tehachapi. A lot of people worked on that project for the last couple of years. The library is downtown where it needs to be, where it should be. It's an institution. It's an amazing building. Ryan Beecham is the owner of the building. I'd like to thank him personally, as I did earlier, but he facilitated that. Supervisor Scrivener had a big part in that, and we're very happy that the library is downtown. So if you haven't visited, please do so. It's an amazing place to be. And then Pilot Flying J opened their doors quietly on Saturday. So I'm sure at some point we'll have a Chamber of Commerce ribbon cutting ceremony here in the next several weeks, or I hope they elect to do that anyway. It's an amazing facility. Jay and his team did so much work on this project. There was so much infrastructure that was designed and installed. So we're very proud of that area, and we hope you come visit their business too, and more luck to them. Good luck. Thank you, Mayor Grimes.
They got great coffee too.
Do they?
It's ground right in front of your face.
Really?
Every cup is ground.
Well, and I ate my first square hamburger, so, and it was good, so. Let's move on. Council member reports, I'm gonna go right to you, Ken, because to let everybody know, there's 3 issues that he wanted to discuss. They are agendized. So go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And actually, I've been requested to, after we get them now back on the agenda, I've been requested to remove item number 13 and number 15, but I will continue to discuss number 14. Item number 14 was based on most of us who live in our community drive past our city limit signs on a regular basis. We see the elevation and we also see the population number on those signs. I think it is very important that we all be provided with the accurate and true information regarding to what our city demographics look like. We voted on it tonight to pass the districting map. Those maps, the demographer, the information behind that was all driven by our population count being 8,517. None of our city limit signs reflect that number. And if, Tori, can you scroll up a little bit there, please? I think it would be beneficial that we be proactive in making sure that we all understand who we are, where we live, and what our numbers look like up here. So my proposal tonight is to recommend that we proceed with making this just very, very minimal slight modification to each one of our signs. And I think we've either got 5 or 6 of those. It's as simple as going to one of our local printing companies, having them bang out a couple of new stickers with the proper affiliated population count being 8,517. And we go out and overlay each one of these signs so our numbers are represented properly to the citizens in our community. And that's my proposal.
Okay. Go ahead. Oh, I want to go to the public. Any comments from the public regarding this issue? Seeing none? No.
I was on the council back in 1998 when this started. We're a city that's associated with prison. Now, we all pay taxes. We're getting ready for getting our wallets out again here. Everyone's getting their receipts ready for the upcoming, how much we're gonna pay. Every one of us pays taxes to the state and to the federal. Now, when you want your money back from the state, it's allocated by population on many fronts. Some of it is for our roads, for other parts of our government, and when it's population-based, it makes a big difference if you're allowed to include the population of the prison. So back in 1998, those cities in California who have a prison near them are allowed under state law and Department of Finance for the state to include the population of those residents that are in prison, incarcerated. And that reason for that is because of the impact that the prison has on your community, traffic, people that reside in the community that may have inmate relatives out there. There are certain impacts to a city that has a prison. So this is all above board, and what you want on your books is a population that reflects the prison population so that you get an additional amount of money from the state. And it's no small amount. This last year, we're talking $607,000 additional money revenue from the state of California Department of Finance as a separate line item. It's all categorized for the prison population. Now, since 1998, we're coming up on, this was January 20th, 98 when we passed this. And so if you calculate that over 20 years, that's a lot of money, several $1 million that we're allowed, when we pay our taxes to the state, can we please have some back and a little bit more? And that's why we do it. And that's why the signs reflect the total population in addition to the population of the prison. There are impacts from the prison, and we're allowed to offset that somewhat with reimbursement from the state. Not all cities get it, not all cities have a prison that they have to deal with. So it makes perfect sense. I do not want to change those signs whatsoever. I want it's on the books, the population, when we get things for road tax, things like that. It's allocated by population. Forget all the other items, Hannah could tell us, but it's very important that population be included, and I am not one to want to change the signs one person. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, could I say just one thing?
Yeah.
Even if we calculated in the prison population, which has fallen drastically from its high of several years ago, and Mayor Grimes is probably the best to know that. When I found out the number at the prison, it was 3,218 people. So if you took what we just voted on in regards to districting ourselves into voting areas of 8,517, and then you take the 3,218 and add that, the number's still not right. So I'm just purely asking you, the other option is we can put on here, town population plus prison population. I mean, if we want to be truthful to the people in our community, they need to know what is driving that number. So we have a duty to be truthful. And Mr. Smith, I totally agree with you. The benefit that we receive from the state of California is significant. It's a big number. At the same time, when people come into our town and they see, 13,258 people, it's misleading because it's undefined. And it's misleading because it's undefined, and it's also misleading because the current prison population has gone down. So even if we don't go to the 8517, which was used, we need to take the 8517 and add the 3218 to it and come up with a new, more reflective number of where we stand in our community. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
My only comment on the issue is that in 2020, which is 2 years away, we're going to have a new census, and it's going to change everything anyway. And it's I know you say that we can put strips, to cover it up, but these signs are very expensive, and they're professional looking. And I think putting a piece of tape on there which reflects the new population is a cheap way of doing it. And I would rather wait until the 2020 census when it's going to change anyway. So that's my comment. At this time, do I have a motion on item number 14?
I'll make the motion, and just for clarification, and I'm not trying to be a wise guy, but if Tori could roll that sign back up, can you blow that up or no? The number actually is already taped over.
Who did it?
Oh, I don't know. That was done many moons before I became involved in population numbers up here, but and it looks very professional. It's a simple fix, and it's minimal dollars. But yes, I will make a motion that we do a very, very minimal, cost-intrusive correction to our signs to represent what we truly have. I'd even be willing to throw out my wallet and pay for these stickers to correct what is represented to the public. It's not that much.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second on the item as discussed, updating of population signs.
But I want Ken to pay for them.
I'm gonna flip a coin with you.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion is defeated. Okay, moving on, is there any council member reports? Susan, you have any?
Oh, I just wanted to echo the city manager. Y'all need to go see the library. It's amazing. And the best part of it is all of the children's area is downstairs in the basement. So, they've got the area separate. It's beautiful. You need to go look at it.
Is it still a wood floor down there? Or did they finish?
No, it's all Yeah.
I got some.
Okay.
You know, we went on the Christmas parade, and for those of you that I talked to and that I haven't seen you for whatever, how many years or whatever, and haven't talked to you, thanks for the good conversation. I just wanted to say that Councilman Hedke, Mayor Pro Tem, Mayor, Councilman Smith, thanks for the camaraderie. Thanks for being my friend. I had a great night.
You're welcome. Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
That's next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other comments? Have none. At this time, I'm gonna.
Hang on, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to say that I actually went out to pilot also. I have to give kudos for the guys that were behind the design work and the aggressive construction schedule to pull that together in just merely, 3 or 4 months if you go from start to finish. It's impressive. It's an impressive building on the outside. It's impressive on the inside. And I agree with Dennis. They serve great coffee out there. And it was very refreshing to see something new in our community that was, it spit shined. It really looks fantastic. So all the city staff that was involved in that, kudos to you guys for getting that done.
Yeah, but they ought to go to the devil for having a cinema in there.
Okay, before I close the meeting, there's 2 other comments. I'm gonna allow it this time, but make it short, because we gotta get out of here.
Where are we going?
Hey, my name's Laura Schmidt. I live in the city. You announced just a few minutes ago that all of these items that were here for remarks were agenda items. In other words, all of Mr. Hedgeke's proposed comments. Are those still agenda items, or did you just cancel number 15 out?
Okay. Number 13 and 15 were pulled by him,
Okay,
and he's allowed to do that.
all right.
So, no action taken. Okay. Meeting is adjourned.
We're still laughing.